Thank you for clicking on this video. If you are interested in true crime like I am, I invite you to click subscribe and come back for more stories of true crime. I will be talking about husband killer Barbara Stager, who murdered 2 husbands in cold blood 10 years apart. And when I say cold, I mean ice cold. My sources for this true crime are linked in the description box below. In my telling of this case, I mean no disrespect to any of the persons mentioned, and it is my intention to relay this information for educational purposes and to give a voice to the voiceless. On August 31st, 1948, Larry Ford was born to parents Henry and Doris Ford in the town of Colfax in the state of North Carolina. Larry was the first child in the family, and Henry and Doris were a nice couple of modest means, growing a nice family, eventually having 5 children in total. They were a family of faith and attended a Methodist church. Henry and Doris did the best that they could, helping to send any of their children who wished to attend college. And that's what Larry Ford wanted. Larry wanted to be a teacher. Growing up, Larry was quiet, thoughtful, polite, and a very good student. Larry was active in church, and he also attained the rank of Eagle Scout. He was a leader in school, joining several academic clubs, and he was a member of the track team. And Larry wanted to go to college. Larry chose Appalachian State Teachers College in Boone, North Carolina, located in the western part of the state. He had a successful freshman year, living on campus and doing very well in his classes. His classmates would remember Larry as a smart, level-headed, sincere, and generally nice all-around guy. When Larry returned to campus in his sophomore year, a friend of a friend introduced him to a new arrival at the school. In her first year as a freshman, the quiet and petite Barbara Terry. Barbara Terry was born October 30th, 1948, to James and Marva Terry. James and Marva were hardworking, church-going, country people, both growing up in large families on farms in Durham County, North Carolina. James would eventually work for Duke Power Company, and Marva worked at Duke University Medical Center. The couple expected great things from their children, eventually growing their family to include 2 sons and a daughter. They expected great things especially from their firstborn child, Barbara, and Barbara strove to please her parents. As a child, she was shy, reserved, quiet, obedient, and she listened to her parents. Above all, she was a people pleaser. Nearsighted, Barbara wore thick glasses to school. She considered herself somewhat short, measuring 5 foot 4 inches. Often self-conscious of her looks, Barbara considered herself not very attractive and kept a low profile throughout her high school years. She was quiet and studious, excelling in classes and getting great grades. She was well-behaved and thought of as a straight arrow, and hung around with like-minded friends. Barbara and her brother Alton, only 1 year apart in age and very close to one another. They both played in the school marching band at Northern High School, located in the Durham area. Barbara attended a Baptist church with her parents, and her family was very active there. Barbara attended Sunday school, worship services, prayer meetings, revivals, and more. Faith would continue to be a central part of her life for years to come. Barbara graduated high school in 1967, number 33rd out of her class of 233. She had her sights on college, and she earned a scholarship to attend Appalachian State Teachers College in Boone, North Carolina. It was located 200 miles from home. Barbara wanted to be a teacher. In college and 4 hours away from home, away from her parents' strict rules and all that they expected from her, Barbara began to loosen up a bit. She attended classes and did well, but as her group of friends expanded and she met more people, her interest in academics would wane. And when she met fellow student Larry Ford, her attention definitely shifted from school to love and romance. After Larry and Barbara met during the fall, they were quickly cemented as one of the steady couples on campus. They were sexually active, and the relationship became quite serious. A little too serious for Larry, it seemed, as he attempted to break up with Barbara in February of the following year. But Barbara, showing signs of masterful manipulation, had instantly gone into a catatonic state, becoming unresponsive and eventually frightening her roommate so much that she took her to the hospital, where she spent the night sedated. And when Barbara eventually returned to campus the next day, she and Larry Ford had reconciled. Barbara got what she wanted. Barbara wanted more, however, and in May she became pregnant. She wanted more assurance that indeed she and Larry would stay together. Immediately after her pregnancy was confirmed, Larry and Barbara wed. They got married in the town of Boone, close to campus, on May 21st, 1968. They decided that Barbara would drop out of school, while Larry would continue to pursue his teaching degree. Barbara's parents helped the newlyweds buy a used mobile home, and they settled on property near Larry's parents. They both found jobs for the summer, with Larry returning to college in the fall for his junior year. The plan was for Larry's parents to help Barbara out at home. Left by herself and resentful that Larry was back at school among friends with the freedom to do what he wanted, Barbara hated her situation. All she could do was wait for the birth of her baby, whose arrival came on December 2nd, 1968. Barbara's first son, James Bryan, whom they would call Brian, was a healthy baby boy, and Barbara and Larry loved and adored him from the start. The new family of three moved in together near the college campus in Boone, where Larry continued his classes and Barbara started to work. Larry finished his required classes for his teaching degree in 1970, with only one semester of student teaching to complete before he would receive his degree. But life got in the way. War was escalating in Vietnam at that time, and before he could be drafted for longer service duty, Larry decided to fulfill his military obligation and he joined the Marine Reserves. When Larry left for military duty, Barbara and baby Brian moved back to live with Larry's parents. Barbara's behavior was becoming suspicious, and she was often away from home for unexplained stretches of time. Larry's parents suspected Barbara of seeing other men. Feeling stifled in her situation at home with a baby and nothing much to do, Barbara found a new job at a bank. And together with her baby, she moved out of Larry's parents' home into a small 2-bedroom apartment in the town of High Point. When Larry returned from the Marine Reserves, he joined Barbara in the apartment. He also took a job in management at Sears, putting off his student teaching requirement for another year. Larry also started to notice that Barbara's spending habits were very worrisome and that they were beginning to live beyond their means. In his free time, Larry began to take Taekwondo classes. It would become a passion of his in the years to come. In Barbara's free time, she pursued another passion, the attention of other men. According to the later account of coworkers, Barbara acted very sexually while at work in the bank, having at least one obvious affair with a client. She needed constant attention from men, and she would go out of her way to find it. In 1974, Barbara and Larry had been married for 5 years. Their marriage was far from perfect, but they had stuck together. They bought a new house, overspending on both the house and all the new furniture and appliances that were needed to fill it. Their debt was steadily creeping higher and higher. Though the relationship between Barbara and Larry was strained, one thing they both agreed on was their love for their son Brian, and they were both overjoyed with the arrival of their second son, Jason. Jason Andrew Ford was born on July 27, 1974. Barbara decided to have her tubes tied after that delivery. She would not be able to have any more children, a fact that she would neglect to share with the other men in her life in the years to come. Before Jason was born, Larry was able to complete his student teaching requirement, receiving his teaching degree in 1973. However, instead of teaching, Larry was offered a job as an office manager. Seeing how much he and Barbara needed the money, with one child and one on the way, Larry took the job, making more money than he would have in a teaching position. The birth of Jason was not enough to heal the fractured marriage between Barbara and Larry, and they separated when he was just 3 months old in 1974. Barbara moved with the 2 small boys into a small apartment back in High Point, and Larry stayed in the house that they owned together. Co-workers of Barbara were aware that she had her sights set on a new man, another co-worker with whom she had started an affair even before the separation between she and Larry had begun, in a move for which he would likely thank his lucky stars for 10 years later. The co-worker decided to end the affair between he and Barbara. Barbara left the bank job. While Barbara was out of the house, Larry missed his 2 sons dearly. While they were going through their separation, Larry learned exactly how much debt Barbara had accrued, but he was still willing to give their marriage another shot. Larry wanted to make their family whole, if only for the sake of his children. Asking Barbara to try once again, he invited her to move back into their house, and she agreed. For better or worse, Larry thought. Larry remained in his office managing job, making as much money as he possibly could to support his family and working towards paying back their debt. Larry Ford had the best of intentions, and he just simply was a good guy, trying to do the right thing. It's a shame that Barbara was not. When Barbara and Larry got back together, Barbara simply went back to spending too much money and having affairs. By this time, she had switched jobs, and one affair in particular was speculated to be with her boss at her new secretary job at a big manufacturing company. In fact, he was the company president. Because of that affair, Barbara was forced to leave that job within a year, but the affair continued. According to friends, Barbara's interest in the man was purely financial. She wanted the lifestyle of the rich, and she would do anything to get it. Out of work again, Barbara studied for her real estate license, a position which would pay by commission only. But it also came with the mirage of wealth, and she emulated the successful co-owner of the company, Kay Pugh, a beautiful woman who wore fancy clothes and drove a flashy car. But her image alone of being a professional real estate broker was not landing sales for Barbara, and she would find herself not making any money at all. It was now mid-March 1978. Their son Brian was in first grade. The couple was sinking deeper and deeper into debt. That month, Larry Ford earned his black belt in Taekwondo. He was proud of his accomplishment, and everyone in his karate class thought Larry was just a great guy. It was odd, though, when Larry told his karate classmates that Barbara had told him that someone had been following her home from work at night. She had wanted him to buy her a gun, he would tell his friends at the karate studio. Just several days later, Larry Ford would be dead. Barbara was making plans. Barbara asked the minister of her current church to be a character reference for her because she wanted to buy a gun, telling him that she feared she was being followed. The reference would allow her to go get a gun permit. The minister did what Barbara asked. The very next day, Barbara asked a coworker from the real estate office to go with her so that she could purchase a gun, telling him that she wanted to carry it in her purse for protection. He did so, also taking Barbara out for shooting practice and showing her gun safety tips as well. The number one safety tip, he later said that he had told Barbara, was to make sure that there was not a shell left in the chamber of the gun. Less than 12 hours later, Larry Ford would be dead. The 911 call came in at 12:36 a.m. on Wednesday, March 22, 1978. First responders were dispatched to a 3-bedroom house in the middle-class neighborhood in the town of High Point in Randolph County, North Carolina. The person who needed medical assistance was Larry Ford, father of 2, age 29. At the front door, Barbara greeted the EMTs, wearing blue jeans and a sweatshirt, and she led them to her bedroom. Larry Ford was on his back, in bed, pajamas on, with the covers pulled up to his chest. His eyes were closed. It was almost as if he was just asleep. Blood had already dried in spots on the top sheet and on his pajamas. His face was white, and parts of his body were turning purple where the blood had already started to settle. The EMT personnel checked for a pulse, finding none. Larry Ford was already gone. A small bullet hole was found in Larry's right chest. Under the bed covers was a loaded gun clip. A .25 caliber pistol was lying on the carpeted floor right beside the bed. The first responders automatically wondered, how had the gun fired without the clip? Police arrived on the scene. As it would be brought to light years later, the police were self-admittedly not well-trained investigators, and the scene was not treated appropriately according to standard police procedure. Even so, this is what was noted. When Sheriff's Deputy Larry Allen arrived, he made a cursory investigation of the scene. There was an open gun box on the dresser with a store receipt, and there was an open box of shells right next to it as well. There were several rounds missing. 2 packed suitcases were also noted. They were found between the dresser and the back wall of the bedroom, and they had a pair of high heels stacked neatly beside them. People would speculate later, had Barbara already been packed, knowing that she would be spending the night not at home? Barbara stated the following to the police. She said that Larry had come home from karate class, but that he had been hurt at some point in class. He had gone to bed, but he was uncomfortable, tossing and turning. Barbara had offered to leave him alone in bed, going to sleep downstairs on the couch. She went downstairs, she said, turning on the TV and going to sleep. Sometime later, she said, she had been awakened by a noise. It sounded as if something had fallen upstairs. She had run to the bedroom, and she had found Larry with blood on his chest and gasping for air. Immediately, she had ran downstairs and called for help. Later, however, it was found that she had at first called her mother, not 911. Her mother would state later that Barbara had told her, "Larry's hurt. I think he's dying." And she had told Barbara to hang up and dial 911. The Sheriff Deputy Larry Allen hastily concluded this is what he thought had happened. Unable to sleep, Larry Ford had gotten up and went to look at the new gun that was laying on the dresser. He probably figured that it wouldn't fire with the clip removed. Perhaps he had taken the clip out, leaving a round remaining in the chamber. Then, thinking the gun was unloaded, he had just idly pulled the trigger, with the gun aimed directly at himself, shooting himself accidentally. The investigation, if you could call it that, was over in an hour. The report was written and signed off on as an accidental shooting. No detective had even been called to the scene, which would later anger the detectives in the department. Standard procedure dictated that a detective be called to every shooting case that occurred in the county, and that had not been done. When his neighbors learned of Larry's death, they all assumed that Larry had shot himself, but they didn't know why he would have done it. It was just an accident, they all thought. The night of the shooting, the neighbors, trying to be helpful, asked if they could clean up the bedroom for Barbara, to which she agreed. So they stripped the bedding, turned over the mattress, and remade the bed. The neighbors took the sheets home to wash them. That potential evidence was now forever lost. Even though the initial reporting of the shooting and the handling of the evidence and the witness was botched from the start, when the detectives finally had a chance to view the sheriff deputy's notes and the photos from the scene, they had some questions. It was looking suspicious to them. Barbara was asked to come down to the police station to again explain her version of events. She didn't offer much, however, only repeating the same basic facts that she had told the officer at her house. The investigator felt something was off, and he asked Barbara to take a lie detector test. She stalled, and the very next day, a lawyer called the police station, saying that he represented Barbara Ford and that she would not be taking any lie detector test. Side note to this story, and a very strange coincidence. 15 days after Larry Ford's death, Kay Pugh and her close friend Brenda had been shot and killed by Brenda's husband. Kay was Barbara's former boss at the real estate office, the one who wore the fancy clothes and the person whom Barbara always admired. The killer, Brenda's husband, said that he thought Kay, Barbara, and Brenda were in a lesbian triangle, and that they had all made plans to shoot and kill their husbands. To him, Larry's death had meant that his own life was in danger, and so he had decided to take matters in his own hands. One proper thing that had happened at the scene of Larry's death was that his hands had been bagged by the police officers in order to test them later for gunshot residue. If Larry had been the one to pull the trigger in his own death, surely the residue would be found on his hands. However, when those tests came back, no gunshot residue was present, making it impossible for Larry to be the one who had pulled the trigger, resulting in his death. Only two alternatives remained. Either Larry had been shot accidentally by the gun dropping to the floor and discharging, thought to be very unlikely, or he had been shot by someone else, and that someone would surely be Barbara. The investigator brought his suspicions directly to Larry's parents, Henry and Doris Ford, who agreed that Larry's body could be exhumed to find potentially more evidence. Henry and Doris had become suspicious of Barbara themselves as well. Henry and Doris Ford had been the best in-laws that Barbara could ever hope for. They had supported the marriage of Larry and Barbara after they had found themselves unexpectedly pregnant, giving them a place to live, helping them out with babysitting, and giving them money when they found themselves deeply in debt. They supported Barbara while Larry had gone back to school to finish his teaching degree, and when he was away in the Marine Reserves. They even knew that Barbara was having affairs with other men, but they still supported Larry when he decided to go back to Barbara for the sake of his children, trying to make it work for the whole family. Henry and Doris only found out about their son's death when Barbara's minister called them, informing them simply that Larry was dead. Barbara had not even called them. And when Henry and Doris arrived at Larry and Barbara's house, Barbara would not say anything to them, simply sitting and huddling with her parents who had also arrived. The Fords were shocked. They did not believe that Larry could have shot himself intentionally, and they did not understand how it could have happened accidentally either. They had begun to voice their suspicions to each other after the funeral. They said to each other, Larry didn't even like guns, although he had been trained to use them in the Marine Reserves. And there would be simply no reason why he would have been fooling around with one in the middle of the night. After Larry's body was exhumed, the autopsy found that Larry's wounds suggested that he was shot at close range. However, because the body had been cleaned by the funeral home and a plastic plug had been inserted into his wound, the exact distance could not be determined. Still, the investigators decided to reclassify Larry's death as a homicide. Even with that, though, no charges were brought. The only piece of real evidence at this point, after all the sloppy police work, was the lack of gunshot residue on Larry's hands. The district attorney just couldn't proceed with a case with just that piece of evidence. By the following year, the case had moved to the inactive file, and in March 1979, 1 year after Larry's death, the newly elected sheriff made another determination about the case, stating that it had been reviewed after that time and that they were now satisfied that the shooting had been an accidental death. And with the murder investigation now just simply swept away, Barbara Ford was free to collect on some of Larry's life insurance monies, collecting a total at the time of around $70,000. By this time, Henry and Doris Ford's relationship with Barbara and her two sons had all but ended, even though they tried to still keep in touch with the boys. Barbara never even told them of her plans. She and her two sons were leaving town. They were moving back to Durham, North Carolina, near to where her parents lived. And when the Fords learned that Larry's case would not be moving forward, they told themselves they had to be satisfied that God would be the only one who could deliver justice for Larry's death. Russell Stager was born in Durham, North Carolina, just like Barbara was. He was the first child in the family as well. Named after his father, Russell's birth name was Allison Russell Stager III. His father already went by the nickname of Al, so Russell's nickname was to be Rusty, or Russ. Russ had a happy home life with very loving parents. Al and Doris Stager were a great married couple, just like the Fords were. Al was from New Jersey, and he met Doris when he was a soldier, doing his training at Camp Butner, just north of Durham in North Carolina. Al and Doris met at a USO dance, not long after he had arrived in North Carolina, and they had hit it off right from the start, their attraction very mutual. At the time, Doris had just graduated high school, and she was working as a secretary. Doris had been born on a tobacco farm, and she was the youngest of 7 children. Al and Doris married on December 9th, 1944, just 2 months after they had met, and immediately before Al was set to ship off to Europe to fight. Al served his country in the war in Europe, fighting in France, Belgium, and Germany, and he was able to return to Doris after 1 year. When Russ was born, the Stagers were able to move into a small apartment. And when he was about 5 years old, they had managed to buy a house, a home in which Russ would grow up, and the Stagers would remain in that home for the next 25 years. When Russ was 7 years old, the Stagers welcomed one more addition to the family, a sister named Cindy. The Stager family attended a Baptist church, and faith would remain a major influence in Russ's life. A natural athlete, Russ played football and baseball and also enjoyed water sports because of all the lakes in the area, swimming, fishing, and water skiing as well. And from Russ's experience playing team sports in high school, he always knew what he wanted to be: a high school coach. Socially, Russ could hang out with any of the groups of kids at school, and he had many friends. They would often be found hanging out at his parents' house, and Doris would be busy cooking them French fries and hamburgers. Russ graduated from Durham High in 1966, after which he enrolled in Mount Olive Junior College. 3 years later, in 1969, when he was at home and attending a high school basketball game, he met a student named Jo Lynn Ellen. They started dating, and they would date off and on for the next 6 years. In the meantime, Russell was struggling to complete his classes in college, so he decided to join the Army Reserves. He went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for his training, and after that was complete, he sought admission to Campbell College, and he was accepted into the teaching program. At Campbell, he studied physical education, and he played on the soccer, baseball, and tennis teams, graduating in 1972. He did his student teaching requirement near where Jo Lynn lived, and then he landed a position as a physical education teacher and an assistant coach at Holton Junior High School. Russ was on his way to living the life he always dreamed of. In 1974, Jo Lynn and Russ were married. However, after 3.5 years, JoLynn and Russ determined that they were just incompatible and they were not good at living together. So they separated on friendly terms. JoLynn returned to live with her parents, and Russ stayed in the house that they had purchased after their marriage, thinking that he may sell the house. Enter Barbara Ford. Barbara Ford met Russ Stager when Russ had his house listed for sale. His house was only a couple blocks from Barbara's parents' home, and she was interested in buying it with the proceeds from Larry's life insurance. Ultimately, Russ decided that he would not sell the house, striking an agreement with JoLynn. And so Barbara bought another house instead, right across the street from Russ. Barbara had her sights set on Russ from the moment they met, and she made a point of being in the right places at the right times to be around him. Their relationship started out as friends, Barbara talking to him in the neighborhood, and then coming to the high school football games to watch him coach. Soon, she and Russ began dating. While they dated, Barbara got a new job at Security Federal Savings and Loan as a bank teller. Within a few weeks, however, Barbara's cash drawer began coming up short at the end of the day. Within 3 months, her supervisor knew that Barbara had been stealing from the bank. Not only that, she had started to write bad checks for her mortgage payments and for other bills as well. She requested a salary advance at Christmas from the bank, and she just never repaid it. By January, she was asked to leave her job, and Russ was likely not aware of why she had left. Barbara and Russ quickly became engaged, although Al and Doris Stager thought that Russ was being rushed into marriage. But Russ had fallen in love with Barbara's 2 sons, and he considered Barbara to be a good Christian woman, so marriage it was. In 1979, Russ and Barbara were married, just a few days after Russ's divorce was effective. Barbara and the boys moved into Russ's house. He knew no details about Larry's death, only that he had accidentally shot himself. He was never aware that Barbara had actually been suspected of murder. He knew, however, that Barbara complained that her former in-laws had conspired to keep her from getting all of the insurance money due to her after Larry's death, and Barbara wanted all of the insurance money due to her. The insurance company had been holding out, waiting for word from the sheriff's office on Larry's death, and once the death was determined as accidental and officially closed, the company finally released the rest of the funds. The final payment to Barbara was $28,000. In total, Barbara had received $120,000 in life insurance resulting from Larry's death. And she continued to receive the Social Security payments from Larry's account for the support of their 2 sons. Russ loved Barbara's 2 sons, but he also wanted children of his own. Barbara knew this, never telling him that her tubes had been tied, preventing pregnancy. In fact, Barbara had told Russ that she could have more children, announcing shortly after their wedding that she was pregnant. A few weeks later, however, the couple shared the sad news that she had miscarried. It wouldn't be the first time Barbara would play this game. Both Russ and Barbara were overspenders. Soon after the wedding, flush with the newly received life insurance money that Barbara had received, they bought a house in a nice subdivision in the Durham suburbs. It was a large 2-story home with 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. They started with remodeling projects right away and upgraded their cars as well. Barbara would make sure to be around Russ as much as possible. To friends, it almost looked like she was afraid to leave him alone in the company of other women. She took up hobbies to match Russ's athletic lifestyle. She started jogging and weightlifting, and she started wearing contacts, and she cut her hair, even dyeing it a lighter shade of blonde. In 1980, Russ legally adopted Barbara's 2 sons, and their names were changed to Brian and Jason Stager. Russ was very devoted to the 2 of them, coaching them in sports and being an all-around great father. Socially, Russ and Barbara would make friends with two other couples, Harry and Terry Welch and Bill and Carol Gordon. They socialized frequently, going on trips together and attending sporting events together as well. Their friends were amazed at the amount of money Russ and Barbara spent. Barbara always seemed determined to impress everyone she knew, especially her new group of friends. They just figured that Barbara had received a very large amount of money upon the death of her first husband, because there was no way that Russ's position as a driver's education teacher and a high school coach and Barbara's part-time job as a secretary would be able to afford them the very expensive lifestyle they had. In addition to the overspending, Barbara lied constantly. She would lie to coworkers with excuses as to why she had to leave work. She would lie to us that she was making sales at her new job at a radio station, and she would lie about the circumstances of Larry's death as well. She also continued to lie about becoming pregnant, sometimes letting the facade last for a couple of months before announcing that she had miscarried. In 1982, the next big lie that Barbara told to her family and friends, always in an effort to impress those around her, was that she had written a book, which she had sold to a major publisher, Doubleday. The book, titled Untimely Death, supposedly detailed the story of Larry Ford's death. She told Russ and her family that she was to receive a $400,000 advance for the book sale. However, no one had seen nor read the manuscript, not even Russ. Taking the lie even further, Barbara had forged a letter on Doubleday letterhead that she had faked, taking it to the bank as proof of future income and securing a substantial loan. An old high school friend of Russ's worked at the bank, and he approved the letter as a legal contract and collateral, approving the money to be released. Barbara was allowed to withdraw the loan from the bank. However, in 90 days, Barbara had no money to return to the bank on her loan, so she asked for it to be extended for another 90 days. The bank refused, and Barbara was forced to make good on the loan. Later, it was suspected that Barbara's parents had quietly helped her pay back the money. Barbara and Russ's friends became more and more suspicious of Barbara. Her lies were catching up with her. On their own, they had discovered that she had been lying about her book from the very beginning. Calling upon a contact that one of them had had at the publishing company, the contact at Doubleday confirmed that there was no book and no contract. As a group, they knew that they had to tell Russ the truth. When Russ learned of Barbara's lies about the book and about her job at the radio station as well, that it was not making any money at all, he admitted to his friends that he had also been suspicious of Barbara. He had even learned that police officers had come to his house to talk to Barbara, but he didn't know why. Later, it would be discovered that multiple warrants had been issued to Barbara for writing bad checks. She had paid those costs, but Russ would never know about the warrants. However, Russ would eventually find out how deeply in debt the couple truly was. They had been living far beyond their means for 3 years, and Russ had never really stopped to consider how far in debt they were. He just let Barbara manage all the bills. Eventually, he came across a hidden box in their house, stuffed with unpaid bills. The truth was finally laid bare. Their financial situation was very, very dire. The couple met with both sets of their parents, Al and Doris Stager and James and Marva Terry. Together, they created a plan to get Russ and Barbara out of their bad financial situation. The couple would sell their new cars and obtain older cars for themselves. They would sell their beach house, cancel their country club membership, take the boys out of expensive activities, and they would also sell their large, beautiful, and remodeled home. And at Doris Stager's insistence, Russ would now be in control of all the bills, having them sent to a P.O. box to which only he would have the key. The plan was put into motion, and in 1983, the Stager family moved to a smaller, more plain house on Bivens Road on a busy street outside of Durham. Although it was a smaller home and their lavish lifestyle had been curtailed, Barbara still managed to keep the interior of the house in showroom style, always immaculately designed and organized. Russ picked up extra work where he could, and he joined the National Guard to make ends meet as well. He enrolled in night classes to earn his master's degree. In the midst of all the financial turmoil, Barbara felt Russ pulling away, so she started an affair with a coworker, of course. Russ discovered the affair, and Barbara promised to end it. And after talking it over with friends from church, they resolved to try to stay together. However, Barbara could not help returning to her real compulsion, her true compulsion, which was spending money. Within a year, the family was in debt again, with Barbara spending money to remodel their smaller home, to join a new country club, and to upgrade her car. Russ would turn to his former wife, Jolynn, for advice. Jolynn had moved back to the Durham area after she had divorced her second husband, and she and Russ would meet once in a while to talk as friends. Russ confided to her about all the troubles in his marriage, and he felt that he could not leave Barbara because of his devotion to their two sons and for his desire for an unbroken Christian family. The boys had already lost one father, he said. Russ also admitted to Jolynn that he didn't trust the story that Barbara had told him about how her first husband, Larry, had died. Barbara had only told him that Larry had just shot himself while cleaning a gun. Ultimately, Russ confided to Jolynn that he was concerned for his own safety, telling her that if anything happened to him, that she should look into it. Putting his concerns aside, however, Russ was determined to just make it work with Barbara. In 1984, he and Barbara rededicated themselves to their marriage and to God and became even more active in their church. They would stay together.